But
So what about let's talk a little bit about the world Guinness World Record here for the largest comic book collection. So how did that all come about?
okay, so I was on this was probably over 10 years ago. I was on like a message board. There was a podcast way back in the early days of podcasts before they're all being done by celebrities and people now, not present company excluded, but there's a lot of podcasts
Oh
nowadays.
yes, yeah,
There
yeah.
was a there was a
Everybody has a
podcast
podcast.
called Comic Geek Speak that's still going. It's got hundreds and hundreds of episodes out there, and I used to listen to that podcast, and they had a forum, and we would chat about comics on the forum and stuff. Anyway, somebody posted a thing up about some world record largest comic book collection. And it was some guy who had like 65,000 comics, and he was in Australia. And he had 65,000 comics. And I was like, I looked at that and I clicked on the link and I went and I looked at it. And I've got to have more than 65,000 comic books. I don't know how many I have. I'm going to have to count them, and I had them in a database and it didn't give like an easy count. So I had to like export it to an Excel sheet and look at how many rows were in the Excel sheet. I ended up having like something like 100,000 comics, right?
Oh wow. Okay.
In my Excel sheet. But then, so I'm like, wow, okay, let me look at this. Let me go see if I can apply for this. So I go to the Guinness, but this guy's record wasn't through Guinness. It was through something called the World Record Academy, which is kind of like an Australian version of Guinness, I guess.
Okay.
So I went to Guinness and I said, well, when I think of a world record, I think of the Guinness World Record. I don't think of the World Record Academy. So I went to the Guinness site and I looked and looked and looked, and they didn't have a record for world's largest comic book collection. So I sent in an inquiry and I'm like, hey, you got this Australian organization. They've got a record number, and I've got like half again as many as this guy. Wouldn't it be nice if Guinness had a category?
Right.
And they had a much larger number in the Guinness thing. And they're like, sure, here's, let us look into what you would need to do and get back to you. And then, month went by, and then I get an email from them with all kinds of rules and things that I would have to do. And they defined a comic book, and it's like, sequential storytelling with words and or pictures. There can be silent comics, but typically
Right.
it's words and pictures. But but it's not. It is a thing, right? And so they defined what a comic was, but then they also said no duplicates. So like the people who have like, I got a long box full of X-Men #1 by Jim Lee. 300 of them, or
Right.
like some comic shop. It's like, hey, here's the other thing. It's like, I don't have the most comic books of anybody. There's a ton of people that have more comic books than me. I have the biggest comic book collection. And the way I distinguish that is I have bought these comic books pretty much one at a time. I mean, I buy 100 at a time, but you know what I mean. It's
Right.
like I'm not buying a collection from somebody and saying, boom, I've got 20,000 more comics than I had yesterday. And, when you buy collections or you buy a store inventory, there's like just tremendous numbers of duplicate comics in there.
Sure.
So no duplicates was one of the rules. And then there were a whole bunch of other hoops I had to jump through. I had to do verification of it. So there were various things I had to do to prove that I had it. I had to have video filmed. I had to do a public event that people were invited to, which I lucked out because I was doing a panel at the Long Beach Comic-Con that year about building a comic book collection.
Oh, okay.
And I handed out flyers and like, hey, come to my house on, this Saturday, and we're going to have we're going to set the Guinness record, and we're going to have pizza and sodas for everybody. And if you come, you can walk away with some free comic books, because guess what? When I deduplicated my collection, I found I had about 6,000 duplicate comic books in it.
Oh wow.
Because I used to buy doubles of stuff, back in the, which actually I probably should have kept some of those, because now they're making movies out of that stuff. So
Right.
I had like 10 copies of Dazzler #1, which was completely worthless, but probably going to be a $5,000 book when they make a
Yeah, the
Dazzler
next
movie
couple of
with some
years, yeah.
hot actress in it, you know? And I'm
Right.
like, dude,